Hello and welcome to day 3 in this pattern recognition series for intermediate players. Basically, I set the rating from 1200 to 1400 now. So each day I'll increase the rating by 50 points. So tomorrow it'll be 1200 to 1450. Or the next day I do one of these videos. So what do you do when you're trying to decide on a move? Where should you start? Well, one way is to count up the material just to see where to begin. We have 7 pawns versus 7, 4 minor pieces each, 2 rooks each. The queens have been traded off. Now you want to see what your opponent is doing. He's attacking your knight, but a good guideline is to look at checks, captures, and threats in that order. Not only what you can do against your opponent, but what they can move to check, capture, or threaten you. So right now they are threatening to capture our knight. So we may have to do something about that, but we should look to see if we have any good checks first. I don't see anything. This rook could check, but the king would just capture. I don't see any other checks. Well, I take that back. The knight, which is under attack, could go here, but the bishop could just knock that out. Even better would be this forking check here, attacking king and rook. So that's probably the best move. We have to see if our opponent will have any good counterattacks. I don't see any checks, so that's probably best to just go ahead and material here. Capture. And oh, they don't like that. Hold on, what did I miss? I jumped the gun. We have something better. What do we have that's better? Oh, a great example here of looking at checks first. Even in the middle of an attack, I just assumed we would go ahead and material, which that would be okay too, but why not play the winning checkmate by going here? So now, I've mentioned this in the past, it takes about 3 pieces on average to have a successful mating attack against your opponent's king, but that depends on how many defenders they have as well. So here we have the rook, the bishop, and the knight all working together to prevent the king's escape. And whenever a king is in check, there are 3 options: capture the attacker, block the attacker, or run. And none of those can be done here, so it's a mate. All right, on to the next problem. I hope you found that one and did a little bit better than I did. I overlooked that attacking checkmate, going for the easier material, well, not easier, but just going after material instead, which is not always best. All right, material-wise here, we have 6 pawns versus 6. A rook and a queen, 2 rooks, excuse me. So our opponent is ahead by this bishop. They're trying to trade off material. What can we do here? We're behind, so we don't want to go trading more pieces off and just be behind by a whole bishop in the end game. So if we look at checks first, maybe we have something. If we look at checks first, what are our checks? The rook could go here. So that's a possibility, but then the rook will just be captured. Queen could deliver a check here, but then the pawn could just block that. All right. What can we do here? Am I overlooking something? I mean, I guess obviously I am. checks, captures, and threats. I don't see any good checks. I mean, if we take their queen, they could just capture with the pawn or the king. The other checks don't look like they do anything. I mean, if we go here, the pawn will block. If we go, checking with the rook, it'll just be captured. So captures, generally when you're looking, oh, okay, it does work. I guess I overlooked that. I did a few of these videos in a row, so I think I'm getting a little burnout for today. I'm starting to overlook things. So if we go here, we check the king. We also are able to go after the bishop. But then our rook could be captured. So maybe that doesn't work. So we need to take a better look at that. If we check, if the pawn blocks, okay, we'll have time because it'll be a check. So we check. They could block with the pawn, or the king could run. Either way, we'll take the bishop, delivering a check, and then we could pick off the rook, possibly, and have our queen, if they capture, we capture. So let's take a look at this. Check, check. Now we can pick up the rooks. Unless I should look once again, make sure I don't have a better move that I didn't see. No, it looks like we can just grab material this time. All right, on to problem number 3. I'll probably keep this to 5 problems. That way the video is not too long and doesn't drag out. And then I can explain things while I'm doing the problems. Okay, we count up material. We have 2 pawns versus pawn and bishop. Now, luckily for us, they have a rook pawn. We can't go after it because the bishop is protecting it. And they are headed in our direction. So we're successfully blockading that pawn. And now the question is whether or not our pawns, if one of them can promote. So if we go here, the bishop could prevent that pawn from going forward. But then we could push the other pawn. And if that one is captured, the F pawn will successfully promote. So the question is whether that bishop and king can stop both of those pawns. So I'm thinking we just push forward. The bishop is forced to block because if the king tries to stop that pawn, the pawn will just keep running. So bishop has to guard this square, but then the other pawn can push forward. And now that one will become a threat. Okay, we have to do a little bit of calculation here. So pawn pushes forward, bishop goes here, the other pawn pushes. We can't take that one or the one on the other side will promote. So we could let that one go and move up here. But then, will that stop everything? Will it be a draw anyway? Okay, so here we go. Pawn pushes forward. Bishop stops it. Other pawn moves forward. If the king comes up and attacks our pawn, well, we could just grab their pawn and it'll be a draw. but do we have a win? We could move the other pawn. Then the bishop. Well, I think that would be winning. So let's look at it. We go here, push this one. Now we push the other one and it'll promote now. All right, so yeah, that was interesting and required a little bit of calculation there. So that's what I was talking about in past videos. The higher rating level you go, the more calculation is involved. If you keep the puzzles a little easier, it's more about pattern recognition. But then again, even in difficult problems, you're going to see maybe a group of patterns working together. So on to problem number 4. Knight is attacking our rook. We have 3 pawns. Our opponent has a lot more, 6. They also have an extra bishop and a knight. And we just have our queen and rook. But it looks like that's all it's going to take, I believe. So this is similar to one of the earlier puzzles. I'm trying to remember if it was the puzzle that we did on this video or the previous one, because I did a batch of videos today. I probably need to wrap it up, because if I do a bunch of them, I kind of get worn out by the time I get to some of these videos and make some more mistakes. All right, here we go. We're looking at checks first. So the obvious check would be to go here. Our queen doesn't want to go here or it'll be captured by their queen. So rook checks, but then what? Pause the video if you want to calculate it out a little bit. We have a block by the rook, but that allows a check. The king would have to run into the corner, and then it's a back rank mate. So check, check, and back rank mate. All right, that was the 4th problem. On to number 5, and I may wrap it up after 5 problems, as I mentioned. That way the video doesn't drag on too long. Okay, material count. We have 6 pawns versus 6. 2 minor pieces, 2 rooks, queen. So material is even. The knight is forking both of our rooks, so we need to do something about that. But how? And what is the best way to deal with this? And we have to see if there are any checks. Does our opponent have any checking threats? I don't see anything. So do we have any checks? Well, we could capture here. That's the only check I see at the moment. If we do that, what will our opponent do? He'll most likely just capture with his rook. And then we could capture the other rook. The king moves into the center here. And then we could go after this pawn. But maybe we have something better. Maybe we need to change up the order a little bit of all that. We have to watch out. The knight is also attacking our queen as well. So we need forcing moves. So what about capture? And then the rook will be forced to capture. And maybe then, maybe then we capture this pawn, driving the king into the corner. And then we can deliver a mate. So, calculate that out in your head. Pause if you need to. If not, here we go. So we're going to capture. Remember, when a king is checked, there are 3 options: capture, block, or run. Our opponent decided to capture with the rook here. So instead of just capturing again, now we can check again. And because these pieces are side by side, diagonally, I guess, you can't block that. The king has to run here because the bishop is protected by the queen and cannot be captured. And so that allows this back rank mate here. So that's a great pattern to know. And I've actually had something like that. I don't remember if it was in a tournament game, but at some point I did have a game, maybe in my Quest for 2000 series of videos that I have on my channel as well, where I was able to do something like that, where you attack with the bishop driving the king away from the defense of the rook, and then you're able to capture it. So here it leads to a mate. Okay, that was 5 problems. Feel free to leave any comments. I enjoy hearing from viewers and subscribers. If you have any requests for future videos, anything you like or don't like, you can feel free to mention. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. My last name is Butts, so I pretty much, heard all kinds of stuff growing up as a kid, and I try not to let things bother me. So any comments are welcome. Feel free to like and subscribe to support the channel as well. So thank you for watching and have a super chess day.